Hello everyone and welcome to a new series I am doing called Jake Reviews. Today we are reviewing Edge of Sleep, the new TV show on Amazon Prime starring Markiplier. What? But yeah, so we're breaking that down. But basically, I'm through the series. I'm going to be going episode by episode. There's only 6 the episodes already, so I kind of know the background, and now I'm rewatching I just rewatched the first one and doing a video on that. Also, I did not listen to the podcast, which I believe this is based on. There is a podcast, which I actually remember seeing years ago, in which I didn't remember until partway through the show, when there is a lot of symbolism of the triangle. And I remember seeing that. So I remember seeing Markiplier's face and a triangle there in the podcast picture. But I never listened to it. And then I went and looked at the podcast. I'm like, oh, this already exists. I really didn't know much about this show. I'm kind of trying to go at it as general view, because I do know Markiplier, but I really don't know this world that he and the other producers are creating. He is actually an executive producer, I believe. Or just one of the producers, at least. So I don't know if he's the main guy, but he's definitely an actor in it. Also, this is going to contain heavy spoilers about at least the first episode. I will not get into the next episodes until we start to cover them. Alright, so let's get into it. So basically, it opens on sort of a montage and a credit scene of the people who are a part of this project, and it kind of shows some imagery that you will see later throughout the season, especially at the end. It actually kind of goes over all the major scenes that will happen later on, which is very interesting, because I essentially watched them back to back, so I know. So yes, it starts out doing that, then it goes into a voiceover by Markiplier, or I should say Dave, which is his name in this, so now I'll refer to Mark as Dave. So Dave is talking about his sleep problems and how he has essentially nightmares, and this also kind of goes into some of that same imagery and so much foreshadowing just in the beginning. I would say, in my personal opinion, too much foreshadowing. You kind of get a basic idea of what's going on, and in movies, or I should say a series like this, you definitely, I feel like by giving away too much information, you can kind of spoil it, because I feel like the dopamine you get out of watching a series like this is figuring something out that you wouldn't have through world building and other such means, versus it kind of just being all thrown in their face and kind of connected throughout the series. So that's probably a big thing I'm probably going to have through most of the series, is it gives you a lot of information that you can kind of piece stuff together, and there's nothing crazy that kind of make you think one thing and then flip it where it's the other way, if that makes sense. But yes, then after this voiceover, it cuts to a scene where Markiplier has fallen, Dave. It cuts to a scene where Dave has fallen on the ground, and his friend named Mateo is there, and turns out they are night watchmen, which I believe is a FNAF reference.
Was that the bite of 87?
No, I don't know. It might just be a coincidence, but he is a night watchman at some company, and you can see behind him that there is the security cameras, very FNAF-esque, a little bit more modern, obviously, than the FNAF series. But yeah, after Mateo seeing him falling, he takes a video. They're kind of joking around, being friendly, and in my opinion, the acting with being friend, it didn't really come across very well. Markiplier obviously isn't a traditional actor, and a lot of the other actors in the show, I believe, they're not as big names, so they're probably not as good as you would expect out of a AAA movie. I'm just kidding. Out of like a full Hollywood movie. But we've seen movies today that also have bad acting, so I don't know. But the acting wasn't necessarily bad. It was just there was something off with how their friendship was. But I will say, later on in the series, there's some pretty dramatic parts, and all the actors do a very great job of portraying that. So I just think their kind of being friendly was kind of a little lacking, though. So after this, they decide to go to a party, and there is a montage of them getting ready, which also builds their friendship, and it also kind of shows the not as great acting with the friendship, but it is an interesting montage. And now this is where I'm going to say the shots in this movie are very put together. I really like them. It looks like somewhere in Southern California that this was all shot in, and very pretty. The lighting's very nice. The nice shot placement. They did a very good job. Like very comparable to a big Hollywood movie. So I will give them credit for that. All right. So after this, they are heading to the party. And this is when it starts building the eeriness, if you will, of something starting to go on, because they get there and nobody's there, so except for a couple of people, and we don't really get. We might get names, but they don't really matter because they end up finding dead. They end up getting in a fight actually, and then they find out that a person is dead who was just they thought was asleep, and they end up trying to call the cops. The line is busy, which is strange. This is also building that eeriness. So they decide to take these dead people, I believe there's 3 of them, to the hospital. So they're driving there, and it keeps building the eeriness because there's nobody on the roads. It's just them. They get to the hospital. There is a ambulance with the door open in front of them, showing that the hospital is not. There's something wrong there as well. And there's nobody there, so they have to run inside, and it's super busy and chaotic. There's a lot of people running around, and they get in there, and this is when you meet the nurse character, who is named Linda. She's one of there's 4 essentially main characters we've met, and this is the 3rd one that we've met so far. Also, I forgot to mention that we have heard a little bit about Katie, who is the 4th character. And it is someone who Dave, Mark's character, had dated, and it sounds like they broke up. So back to the hospital, they meet the nurse. She's very abrupt and just tells them to throw the bodies on the side of the road. And they're like, what? That's crazy. But they eventually agree, and she runs off doing stuff because she's busy. They end up sitting in the waiting room. This is when we are kind of introduced to the big pharma corporation who is selling this sleeping drug. We see an ad for it on the TV, and it kind of reminds me of Analog Horror in a way, where it's like this old cartoon kind of, and there's something a little bit off, and it's like, you're gonna sleep. Kind of like very, Analog Horror-esque. Which is something I really enjoyed. I really like that genre, so I'm glad. I know Mark does. A lot of the games he plays, FNAF again, he's probably most famous for that. But that is in there, and it is very fun. So after seeing this ad, you're introduced to this young woman and her grandpa, or just old man she's taking care of, and she gives him a little of the grandma syrup, if you will. I don't know if that's the right term, but we're using that. It is an adult beverage. She gives him some of that to help him sleep. So kind of bringing back in the whole sleep thing. And I forgot to mention, once they got to the hospital, I kind of got the general idea of what was going to happen, what was wrong. And it's obviously sleeping is bad, you die. And that kind of was given to me just by all the imagery and stuff we got at the beginning that they gave away that I talked about earlier. It's just kind of, I don't know, giving too much, and they could have kept that back and kind of drawn it out a little bit more, in my opinion. But for a 20-minute episode, which is what all these are, 20 minutes, very short. They don't really have a lot of time, so it seems very quick. Back to the story. It goes to a scene with Linda talking to the hospital manager, and he's saying he's sending everybody home because their shift's done, but nobody's coming for the next shift. And she's like, I'm going to stay. We need people to stay. And then she asks her friend to stay. And she says, I'm going to take a 10-minute nap. And that's a no-no, because as we'll see next, it goes to Mark. I keep calling him Mark. It goes to Dave and his friend Mateo. And they see the old man foaming at the mouth, and you see that the caretaker and the old man are both dead because they were asleep. And they rush into the nurse to let her know, and they tell her about the caretaker and the old man dying in their sleep, and she rushes off to her friend who is just asleep, and she finds her dead. And this is when they make the realization there's some kind of virus that are killing people in their sleep. And then it cuts shots of the empty city, and very cool shots. I like I don't know, I'm always confused I wonder how movies do this, where they show like an empty city. I don't know if they CGI out the cars, or if they just find a time where there's no people driving the road. But yes, very cool imagery of the empty streets. It's also playing an older song, which kind of I don't know. The era in this series kind of confuses me because there's a lot of like older stuff. Like his car that they drive is kind of older, probably like early 2000s, 90s car. And the music is also very old. The intro music is very like 60s esque. Um, and it kind of, I don't know, it does feel, they all fits well together, but they have like iPhones and stuff. So that part's kind of like interesting, but I think it works. But yes, then after that, it cuts to 38 hours awake. I'm assuming Dave, the main character, has been awake for 38 hours because previously he said I've been awake for 40 hours when he was giving an excuse of not going to the party. But yes, that is the first episode. I don't know, I guess in conclusion about the first episode, I honestly would say for somebody who is interested in watching it, I would tell them, yeah, sure, watch it. It is very short. It is 6 episodes, 20 minutes long, like I said. So 120 minutes, so essentially the length of a movie these days. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting. And kind of, if you like Markiplier and the stuff he does, I think you will enjoy it. It's not super funny. There's not really any like funny parts that are done well. Like I said, the whole friendship thing in the beginning kind of had some like jabs and whatever at each other, and they weren't like, I don't know, they weren't super funny and weren't super fitting, but kind of necessary to make the story realistic because obviously they're not going to be super unfriendly to each other if they're going to like a party. I just think they could have done a better job on their portraying the friendship and making it making some funnier remarks. But I mean, the remarks were pretty funny, but there weren't a lot of them. But yeah, if you like, yeah, like kind of the horror and analog horror and a very interesting idea on like some kind of virus, I would watch it. And like I said, it doesn't, I feel like there's a lot of mystery, but it kind of throws that in front of you because you get a lot of imagery of some sort of like cult kind of thing, a monster, kind of ethereal idea, and I find that kind of interesting, but it kind of throws it all to you, so you kind of know what's going on in that way, but you don't in another way. I know that's very confusing, but that's how I felt. But I really, yeah, honestly, I reading as a show. So I might get into this into another episode of what I like. Personally, I like realistic, gritty movies, and I also do like comedies, but I feel like that's kind of a separate genre. A show I'm gonna rave about is gonna be realistic and gritty. This, I think for my taste, it's actually not super realistic, obviously, because it's a lot more ethereal. It's not like, oh, this company, even though it kind of hints at it at the beginning, which is also interesting. I'll get to it later in other episodes, but it kind of hints at this company being this, being the main bad guys, but it's also not. But they still could be. It would make more sense to me if they actually did make a virus, but it's kind of leaned towards this whole ethereal thing where there's like these gods or evil spirits or evil entities essentially that are trying to have this evil plan to do something, which isn't really my thing. I like more actual realistic threats like a company, and you can have some of that like mystery, like, oh, is it an actual monster or is it just something they're seeing? But I like it to err on more of the side that it is something that they're just seeing and they're making up, and it's actually a more physical threat that you can fight, because I like something I can relate to, and something I can relate to is something realistic. So, but yes, thank you all so much for watching this. I'm glad I got to go through this, and I've enjoyed this so far. This series, I'm excited to see where it goes and what turns it takes. There's still a lot unknown, but there's also a lot that is known, like I said before, but we will see. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.